We're good enough. Okay, thanks everyone for having me here today. Thank you to Ukrainian Catholic University. It's been a great honor to be, sorry about that. It's been a great honor. It's kind of weird to have to be stuck here, but I will make fun. Oh, can I have a microphone? I can't have like a TED Talk-esque microphone. Okay, it's okay. Okay, I'd like to thank Uku for bringing me here today. I've had a lot of great experiences in the master's program of media communications, and it's been great. It's been a highlight of my year to be teaching, one of my highlights, to be giving guest lectures up here and doing a documentary workshop in the past year here. So today we're going to do playful disruptions, media opposition, and still having fun. And this is probably going to be a little more low-tech than the previous presentations, as I'm thinking about media in different ways, but I think they all speak to each other and have different ways in which they can interact and work with each other. So just a little bit about me. I'm a U.S. Fulbryt scholar here in Ukraine. I have 1 month left, and I've been doing primarily media literacy courses and projects in Ivano-Frankivsk at Fulbryt Devіда University. And when I'm in the States, I work at Eastern Illinois University, where I do media studies and teach production, primarily courses in documentary. Okay, let's go. So the basis behind this idea of using media as a tool to facilitate humanization, you know, the name of this conference is The Human in Technology. And one of the things I'm really interested in is how society is dehumanizing, and the many ways in which society is dehumanizing. And we can think of many of these. We could think of commercial culture constantly telling you lack something, you're missing something, you're not attractive, you're ugly, your body doesn't look the right way, this sort of thing. Media is just one example of how society is dehumanizing. You could argue capitalism as a system is inherently dehumanizing to people. So one of my goals as a teacher is how can we have a more humanizing society? It's very basic. I mean, it's almost like a simple idea, but what can we do, like very practically, to increase humanization and the idea of being more human? So the key questions in this presentation are, how can we use media to be more human and humanizing in society? How can we be more humanizing through play? And I saw a little bit of this in some of the other presentations as well, the idea of play, for example, in VR. What are the intersections between media, humanization, but also resistance and play? This idea of oppositionality. My background's in a lot of critical theory, and the basis of this theory, of course, is to change things that are a problem, change things that are dehumanizing. So democracy is constantly a work in progress. You don't just have democracy and it's some stable thing and it's fixed and done. No, of course, democracy is always work. And it's going to go forward, it's going to go backwards, it'll go up a little bit, it could push way back, it can go then forward. And it's always a struggle. That's always going to be a struggle. So activism, people who are activists are generally people who try to promote this kind of change. Activism is generally not fun. It's not easy work to change society. It's actually quite boring. You know, the real work of activism behind the scenes, working to change policy, run campaigns, do grassroots projects, change society's long, boring, difficult work. Sad but true. This work itself can make people feel dehumanized. You know, when I read an article about Black Lives Matter recently about the people who do this kind of work and kind of activism, and it's very depressing. People have psychological problems. They're followed by the police. They get death threats. All of that is very dehumanizing. So I'm trying to think of strategies and ways in which media, of course, is pivotal to activism. Technology is a tool in this process. For me, technology is only a tool. Other things we need to consider is the digital divide. Who has access to technologies, who does not, who can afford them, who can buy the latest smartphone, who has access to the internet. We can't assume everyone has that. So we need to also consider these questions when looking at media. Now, because activism is so boring and changing society is so boring, we have to find some strategies for play and to integrate play into this. And I see it quite a bit in activism. And this presentation is going to look at a bunch of projects or initiatives that actually try to integrate play, humor, parody into societal change. And one of the key ideas of this is to denormalize power. Power is very much normalized, or we could use a fancy word, hegemonic. Common sense, but when you denormalize it, we see it for what it is. And we see that it's, in a sense, artificial. So through play, protest, we can do these things. So right now I'm a professor. I consider teaching to be my main form of activism. It's very direct. I'm working with a large number of students. I feel I have a pretty significant chance to make an impact. And also, I'm also impacted. But I have a long history of doing various media-related activist projects. I was a part of a collective called Go Gorilla, which I'll talk about a little bit. I've been an organizer of Critical Mass, which is a bike riding event / party / festival / protest. I've done various protesting recently with the election of President Trump, the Women's March, etc. Let's go to, this is one of my favorite quotes. Emma Goldman's one of my favorite people. She, of course, is an anarchist writer. If I can't dance, I don't want to be part of your, I don't want to be in your revolution. This is probably the most old school image you'll see at this whole conference. And I think there's some truth to that, because activism is boring. You know, activists can be very dogmatic and caught in theory. But to me, practice is the best thing you can do. Doing things, not just being theoretical. So how can we do things, activities, actions? And how can we use that to influence other people and to encourage humanization? Okay, so I'm going to look at different projects that have done this, that I've been a part of, and then I'm going to look at various things that have inspired these various projects. Some of them are new digital media, some are from analog, but I think they speak to each other because new media comes from old media. Okay. Okay, so here's a protest that happened in Illinois last year before I moved to Ukraine. There's interesting to hear in the first presentation, this separation of corporations and government as being like some distinct thing, but in my mind, especially the state of Illinois, it's basically run by a venture capitalist. So in a sense, the government is full-on capitalism. And so basically I live in a state where the government was trying to close my university. I work at a public university, and we depend on public funds to run. And the government decided, we're not going to fund the universities this year. And they decided this for 2 years. And we were scared that our university was going to close. And my university is unique in that a lot of our students are first-generation college students. A lot of them come from rural areas in the United States that are not very wealthy. We have a lot of students from the south side of Chicago whose parents never went to college. So for this school to close, it's a big deal. It's a big slap in the face to have a governor say, we may close your school, especially a man who's like a billionaire. So anyway, there's a lot of protesting. You know, I think a lot of college students are very docile. A lot of college students don't know that they can make change or impact change. There's a lot of apathy. So anyway, we went to a protest here. These are a couple of my students. And I made this sign. You know, it's old school media to make the sign. It's kind of like a craft. It's like the puffy paint and sort of ridiculous. But this was my statement to the governor of my state. And, it was just one image, but then this image circulated via social media. And
Is it not fired?
No. We have a union, thank God. And I think it was an important message for my students to see. Probably 10,000 students at my university, probably most of them saw this image. And I think it's important for them to see that you need to stand up to power, and sometimes you have to do it very bluntly. And with humor. I'm originally from New York, so this is kind of New York humor. Okay. Here's a protest during the second Gulf War that George W. Bush thought would be a good idea to do, which was, of course, a huge mistake. And I was living in Japan at the time, and Japan is not known for its outward displays of protest. It's a very different style of communicating there. And so I made this poster because I'm trying to make protest fun, trying to make protest playful. And it says, if you don't speak Japanese, I don't understand Bush's English. Which is a pretty funny joke because obviously, George Bush wasn't the most articulate of presidents. But this got picked up by the local media, and that was pretty interesting. I was like, wow, that made it into the newspaper. That's like pretty fascinating. And I think a lot of people found a lot of humor in this statement. I do some street art. So I like doing these sort of illicit activities that are quasi-legal. And so again, here's the governor of my state. I made this sticker, and it's all over the state of Illinois. And I get great pleasure doing it. And it's very, I'm not on a computer when I do street art. I'm like walking around and just like slapping stickers on the wall, on the telephone pole, wherever. And I really like that interactivity. It's a different kind of interactivity, but I like that. And this is from a film called They Live. Maybe you've seen the film They Live. It's a sort of famous science fiction film where basically aliens take over the world and they rule the media, and they're all like capitalist. And so that's another homage to my governor. Hopefully when I get back, he will be kicked out of office and he will not get reelected. I'm really hoping. And now, moving on to some new people, Trump. Again, this is a sticker I made, challenging in a playful yet critical way, the Trump brand, if you will. Because most certainly it was his brand that got him elected. So playing with that, this was before I knew Cyrillic, so I just kind of threw in a Cyrillic letter. It probably doesn't make any sense, but okay. Some other projects that I've participated in over the years was, one was called Tough Stuff from the Buff. This was a film and video program that me and a couple friends put together about our hometown of Buffalo, New York. There were activist films, there was more like video art, experimental works. And we toured this by bicycle around the Pacific Northwest of the US and Canada. And so, this is an early digital technology. Obviously, we don't have CDs anymore, really, unless you're like some fringe collector type. But we had a DVD, we screen printed that by hand, and we went on tour to like art galleries and coffee shops, and like this was someone's yard. And then this was outside of a community radio station outside of Vancouver, Canada. But it was fun, and we were trying to encourage other people to make their own media, make their own videos. I think this is like a really kind of like 60s idea. Video came out, and you had the Porta-Pack, and like people were making videos about their communities, and this idea of like owning your own message and making community media. So we're trying to promote that with this tour. And it was also fun to kind of go on a tour. I've never been in a band, and maybe this is my closest approximation I will ever have. Probably not as cool as a band, but what can you do? I was in a group called Go Gorilla. This was when I was an undergraduate at SUNY Buffalo in New York. And we would do things like Buy Nothing Day. We would go into the shopping mall and we'd do performances, and we would dress up in sort of these fake outfits, and we would encourage people to cut up their credit cards and sort of question the consumer lifestyle that is completely rampant in the United States. And So there's these people who do surveys in shopping malls, right? They want to take your survey. So we made a fake survey, and we had people take the survey, and the answers were, sometimes, there was only one choice for certain answers, and it was all about like sweatshop labor and this sort of thing. And eventually the police kicked us out of the mall, and they threatened to arrest us if we came back.
Sounds like yes, no.
Yeah. I'll get to them in a second. Okay, I have 8 minutes. Critical mass is another project I've been a part of. I'm not sure if critical mass happens in Ukraine. Does critical mass happen? Yeah, in Lviv? Nice. How big are the rides? Do you get pretty good turnout?
It's nice and
Okay. Cool. I will have to try to come to it. I have 1 month. So for those of you who don't know, critical mass is lots of people who get together on their bikes, and it's kind of a protest of public space. It's also about community and just being together with other people. It's a celebration. For some people, it's a party. Of course, there's several documentaries made on critical mass. There's all kinds of social media sharing of this kind of thing. But I think it's a great activity to kind of be with other people and just sort of do what Guy Debord called was a derive around. You kind of drift around cityscapes and explore them in unconventional ways, like on a bike with like hundreds of other people. In San Francisco, they have rides that are over like 10,000 people. They totally like shut down the city when they do critical mass. It's pretty awesome. Fanzines were a huge media form for me when I was a young punk teenager. I discovered zines, and zines really changed my life. This is a really old media form. We're getting into paper and print. Whoa, I'm doing something radical here, I think. But zines, of course, are a DIY media where you could screen print, you could write whatever you want, and you just photocopy it, and you share it, and you send it. These communities still are very much alive. There's very much subcultures that are doing zines. I saw some zines in Kyiv when I was there a couple months ago. I thought it was pretty cool. See zines circulating around. And of course, zines can be digital. There's people who PDF their zines, and their zines are online, they're distributed. Then there's some people who see it as kind of a digital resistance. We don't put our zines on the internet. So there's this kind of like debate about that and the sort of legitimacy or authenticity of these different practices. And then, of course, people, blogging sort of emerged from this, or was influenced by zines, I think, in some ways. Microcinema culture, the idea of making spaces where you watch media and gather with small numbers of people, and maybe watching more obscure works or political works or radical works that won't be screened elsewhere in the community. And the idea of coming together, and it always, so I did this for 2 years where I live in the States, Champaign. It's called Hallways Microcinema, and put on 30 events over a couple years, and they were all free, and it was just like, it would be some sort of media event. I'd have traveling filmmakers come in and show their work, or various artists, installation artists would come and show up. This was basically set up in my apartment, which, it was kind of interesting. My apartment became a venue. And this was only promoted through texting. You had to get a text to find out. It was the only promotion was through text messages, which is trying to play with the idea of promotion, because if you put posters around and everything, then too many people would come and you'd probably get in trouble or something. So in Numan Transformation, I'll show you a little bit of what we've been doing down there. I'm teaching this class that's actually ending next week called Experiments in Media. And it's completely student-generated. I'm trying to totally invert education. It's probably sort of anarchistic. But I've been giving them these assignments. They're not really assignments, they're just projects, and they have to completely conceptualize all of them. They have to decide, we're going to do this, and this is why we're going to do it. And I'm like, okay, let's do it. And I just kind of facilitate it. And I think that kind of freedom is completely alien to them. But it's fun to play with that, and I think some of them really like it. Others are just completely, yeah, that's just too much. So here's one of the projects we did. It was the idea, students, we were doing some culture jamming projects, and they made these sort of protest signs. I mean, they're not that radical or anything. And then we went into the city center of Ivano-Frankivsk, and they had these signs, and they had discussions with people coming by. And it was just kind of an experiment. We'll see what happens with this. Does it work? Does it not work? We're trying something that's different. So I'll show you a little piece of this video. You'll see a little excerpt.
In God we trust, and in Ivano-Frankivsk we have in Brukivka this stuff for payment we trust, because the wife of the of the head of our local authorities is the owner of factory that made such stuff, such Brukivka, and now everywhere in Ivano-Frankivsk we have Brukivka, so it's like in Brukivka we trust. Another point of this picture that with this Brukivka the revolution in Ukraine in 2014 started. So in Brukivka we trust.
So you're saying the government has a connection with the husband
Yes.
and wife, and then they're using their products to make new roads.
To make new roads and to make new payments in Ivano.
So what's the problem with that?
Actually, you know, it's like they gain money from doing good things, but like the problem with this paying fund is that after the half of the year we have again some problems with this booking.
Okay, so just a little excerpt, and then they, so they're kind of critiquing, like ripping down old buildings and putting up new ones that are not so spectacular. They were, again, I'll repeat that for the translation, they were tearing down buildings in Ivano-Frankivsk that were like old, traditional, historical, and like building like apartment buildings with like no sense of character or sense of location or place or history. So they had some signs about that too. And then we had conversations with people just sort of walking by. And I thought it was really interesting because the social space between the students and the people talking was very big. And it was like, they would be like 15 feet away talking to each other. I thought that was fascinating. But I can just kind of drift ahead here. But yeah, they're talking and they kind of...
Is it finished, the project?
That was just, so we just did a bunch of short projects, and that was one of them, and we finished it, and then we moved on to other short projects, like short, quick projects that we can do over like a couple of weeks was the idea. So that's been really fun. There's a lot of influences to this kind of thing. I'll just kind of barrel through this kind of quickly. Of course, punk culture is very seminal to my worldview. I consider it to be my first education before going to school or anything. Probably my most important education. Really at the core is this idea that anyone can make media, anyone can do it, anyone should be doing it. And that you don't have to look like some professional, or you don't have to look like Hollywood and this kind of thing. And I think those are really great, powerful messages. RIP, or Remix Manifesto, is a little bit dated by this point, but I think it's a really interesting film about remix culture and this whole idea of like remixing and taking media and changing it and then uploading it. And their manifesto is really great. Culture always builds on the past. The past always tries to control the future. The future is becoming less free. To build free societies. Please stop. Okay. To build free societies, you must limit control of the past. Okay, interesting. Of course, remix culture is great. I just found this morning. That's how contemporary this meme is. And of course, I don't know if you're following this sort of nonsense in the United States. The football league is saying you can't protest during the games. And so I saw this sort of remix this morning, and I was like, fantastic, this is great. I love this kind of remix culture, and it's an awesome critique. You don't have to have a course in sociology or critical theory or race theory to understand what this means. It's very clear. This is another thing that was sort of ridiculous that happened in the United States, I think last week or so. This woman was at a park in Oakland, California, and she saw some black people and thought that was scary and decided to call the police for no reason at all. And now the internet has reacted in very awesome ways that I think are funny and a kind of protest and challenging this, what is basically white supremacy, and like, I can just call the police because I see someone doesn't look like me, and that's against the law. Like, so there's a huge backlash against this, and it's very funny. You know, the backlash is funny, and this can be an educational moment. We could actually look at these and learn something, and it's very low tech, and it's very easy to share, and it's very, yeah. So there's various memes of this woman, you know, calling the police on former President Obama, and then Rosa Parks is pretty ridiculous. This stuff's happening right now. So there was a lawyer in New York City who went into a restaurant and people were speaking Spanish, and he started being really rude to them and saying that you shouldn't be speaking Spanish and this or that. And the reaction has been great. And I love this because pre-social media, that thing may have happened and no one would know that it happened. You know, that would have happened in a restaurant. It would have been like, oh, it's just another guy being racist, and you know. But now it's like being documented, and that's being shared, and then that's being remixed, and then that's being widely criticized, and I think that's amazing. So a bunch of people got together and they did a GoFundMe, and they crowdsourced a mariachi band to play outside of his apartment, and they had a party outside of his apartment, and they were playing this beautiful Mexican music and having a good time. And I think it's amazing. I'll show you a short clip of it, and then I think I'm running out of time. I don't know, do I have like a few extra minutes, or like?
Up to 5 minutes.
Oh wow, I have up to 5 minutes more.
What the question?
Oh. Oh.
Okay, go.
Okay. We'll just watch this short video. It's like 20 seconds, and then we'll just cut this presentation short. You know, I had some Ukraine moments in here too. You know, I'm not just talking. I threw a few good ones in here. A little famine. Maidan, of course. You know, you can't wear helmets, so I will wear a pot on my head. I think is a great form of protest and symbol, and it makes authority and power look ridiculous. The Bionic Baking Brigade. You may not have heard of these people. They were based in the Bay Area, and they would pie people who are famous politicians, or here we see Bill Gates getting pied. They pied Milton Friedman, which was one of my favorite pyings they ever did. And they would just go to these sort of talks and they would just pie people, and as a kind of resistance. And the great thing about the pieing, there's actually a whole documentary on this called The Pie's the Limit. Check it out. Everyone gets what a pie to the face means. You don't have to have any education at all to understand what a pie to the face means. And I think it's a great form of protest. I think it's fun, it's funny, and it calls out power, like power should be called out. So let's watch this short little clip of the mariachi band, and then we'll have a very short Q&A. Yeah, it's only 20 seconds. So here's the mariachi party. Probably wouldn't happen if it wasn't for media or social media or.
But was Russia Today? That was a Russia Today.
It was Russia Today.
That was Russia? Sorry. Okay. Do I have any last thing to say? No.
Okay. If there are any questions, please just. I got down here.
Yes.
If there are any questions, please ask David. Можна українською, ми перекладаємо.
Hello, my name name is Tatiana. Have you arrived to Ukraine after Maidan because of your love of Project Fun? Is there any connection between our Maidan and your arrival to Ukraine?
Is there a connection between what I'm doing in Ivano-Frankivsk and Maidan?
Your decision to arrive here?
That wasn't completely central, but the idea of doing media literacy in such a post-revolution society absolutely was appealing to me. And thinking about where we could go with that and how we could work with it, and that's how students can learn these tools, because at the school I teach at least, these ideas are not taught at all, or very minimally. So I thought it was a great chance to work alongside the students in this kind of conversation and strategies to think about it and approach. And of course, the students already were media literate in a lot of ways in Ivano-Frankivsk. But to go deeper into that and like really investigate further has been really great.
Hello, David.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing your experience and time with us. I would like to ask you about, you spoke and regarded technology as a tool.
Yeah.
What if we regard technology as an art? Maybe it has more humanizing power in society. Thank you.
Sure. I use the word tool broadly. If you want to use the tool for art, if you want to, I consider all of these sort of actions artistic. And I guess that gets into the question, like, what is and what isn't art, and this. But I think you can use the tool however you want to use it, and that should be ultimately, hopefully, humanizing in some way.
Наступне питання.
Any other questions?
Any other questions? Якщо немає, так? Тоді ми хотіли б подякувати, по-перше, Девіду за дуже цікаву презентацію. Я буду так переходити з мови на мову. And also we would like to wish David a happy birthday, since we just found out it actually is today. And we have a small present for him as well. That's from Uhu and our department.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
That's why the formal was original.
Well, people were calling him to wish him, something, and we were distracting him.
So it's also Media Communications' birthday and my birthday? Coincidence?
Yeah, I don't think so.